AITA for stopping giving gifts to my husband. He promised to give me an expensive ring, but he didn't. Last year, I decided to treat myself to something nice, just a little indulgence to celebrate my hard work and the fact that, well, I deserved it. I bought myself a beautiful bracelet and a matching necklace, pieces I had been eyeing for a while. When I got home, I showed them to my husband, excitement bubbling in my chest as I fastened the delicate clasp of the bracelet around my wrist. I casually mentioned that there was a matching ring as well and that I would love to have it someday. He nodded, smiled, and said, "Yeah, that would be nice." I didn't push. It was just a passing comment, an expression of a small future wish. Months went by, and then one day, I saw that the ring had gone on sale. A pretty significant discount, too. I mentioned it to my husband, just in case he might be interested in surprising me or making a special occasion of it. To my delight, he immediately responded, "Let's go." He seemed genuinely excited about it. On the drive to the store, he even asked, "Are you excited?" and I laughed, feeling giddy. Of course, I was excited. The idea that he wanted to get me this ring, that he remembered I had wanted it, made me feel special. When we got to the store, I found the right size, and the salesperson brought out the card machine to complete the purchase. I turned around, expecting my husband to be there, but he wasn't. At first, I thought he had just wandered off to look at something else. I called his name, but there was no answer. Confused, I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. He picked up after a few rings. "Where are you?" I asked, still glancing around the store. "I left," he said, completely casual, as if that were a normal thing to do. I was stunned. "What do you mean, you left?" "The ring is too expensive," he said, his voice flat. "I can't afford it." I stood there in disbelief, the salesperson watching me awkwardly as I processed what had just happened. It wasn't that I expected him to buy me the ring no matter what, I never asked him to do that. What got me was the way he had hyped me up, acted excited, driven me all the way there, let me pick out my size, and then just disappeared. He could have said something before we even got in the car. He could have told me it was out of budget, and I would have understood. Instead, he let me get my hopes up, only to pull the rug out from under me. I left the store feeling humiliated. When I confronted him about it, he doubled down, insisting he just couldn't afford it. But the thing is, he could. It wasn't about the money, it was about the principle. If he had told me up front, I would have been fine. Instead, I felt tricked. Months passed, and eventually, our anniversary rolled around. He asked me what I wanted as a gift, and I honestly hesitated to answer. After what had happened with the ring, I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment again. But then he brought it up himself, saying, "I could get you that ring if you still want it." I was skeptical but hopeful. Maybe this time would be different. "Are you sure?" I asked carefully. "Yeah," he said. "I just might need to get it a couple of days after our anniversary, if that's okay." I told him that was fine. I didn't care about the exact timing, just the sentiment behind it. And to be fair, I had gotten him a nice gift. I bought him a high-end coffee machine, along with all the supplies he would need to make his favorite drinks. It wasn't just any coffee maker, it was the one he had been eyeing for months but never bought for himself. I wanted him to have something he loved, something that showed I paid attention to what made him happy. Our anniversary came and went. 2 days passed. Then 3. Then a week. The ring never appeared. I finally brought it up, asking, "Hey, what happened with the ring?" And just like before, he said, "I can't afford it." I stared at him, frustration boiling under my skin. "Then why did you say you could get it?" He shrugged, like it was no big deal. "I thought I could, but I changed my mind." That was the moment something in me shifted. I wasn't upset about not getting the ring, I was upset about the pattern. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a habit. He got caught up in the excitement of the moment, made promises he had no intention of keeping, and then left me to deal with the disappointment. It wasn't just about gifts, it was about reliability, about following through, about not making commitments if he wasn't actually going to honor them. So I made a decision, I was done giving him gifts. If he could repeatedly promise me things and never follow through, then why should I continue putting in effort for him? For our anniversary, he gave me a gift, but I didn't give him anything. Why should I? Gifts should be about thoughtfulness, about effort, about showing someone you care. But effort should go both ways, and I was tired of putting in all the effort while getting empty promises in return. Now, I can't help but wonder, am I the asshole for refusing to buy him gifts anymore? Update 1. The holidays have always been a special time for me. I loved the comfort that came with the first cold weather, the expectation of pleasant surprises, the very process of choosing gifts for loved ones. There was something magical about the thought and care that went into it, about finding the perfect thing that would light up someone's face. But this year, things were different. This year, I decided to stick to my principle: if he does not keep his promises, I will not make any more efforts either. Christmas arrived, bringing with it the usual warmth of twinkling lights and the scent of cinnamon in the air. When we sat down to exchange gifts, Jake handed me a carefully wrapped package. Inside was an elegant wool scarf and a pair of leather gloves. He knew that I appreciated quality things, and it was clear that he had put some thought into this. The scarf was soft and warm, the gloves perfectly my style. I smiled, thanked him, but did not prepare a gift in return. For a brief moment, I saw something shift in his expression, a flicker of confusion that he quickly masked. He didn't say anything about it, but I could tell he had expected something. Valentine's Day came next. This time, he put in even more effort. He surprised me with dinner at a restaurant I had been wanting to try for ages, a place I had mentioned in passing but never thought he actually paid attention to. The atmosphere was romantic, soft candlelight, gentle music, the kind of place that made you feel like the only two people in the world. He was attentive all evening, making sure my wine glass was always filled, his gaze fixed on me like he was making an effort to truly be present. At the end of the night, he handed me a small box, inside of which was a beautifully crafted scented candle. Vanilla and sandalwood, my absolute favorite. I thanked him again, touched by the thoughtfulness of it, but once more, I gave him nothing in return. This time, I noticed the change. He was confused. There was a slight hesitation, a moment where he looked like he was going to say something, but then he didn't. His birthday arrived, and I made no preparations. No searching for the perfect gift, no wrapping paper, no hidden surprises waiting for him. Friends and family showered him with small presents, their well wishes filling the day with the usual warmth that came with birthdays. But from me, there was nothing. At first, he said nothing. He kept glancing at me throughout the day, as if waiting for me to reveal some kind of last-minute surprise. When the evening came and still, there was no gift, no mention of one, he finally couldn't hold back anymore. He looked at me, his brow slightly furrowed, and asked where his gift was. I met his gaze without hesitation and told him simply that I don't give gifts to people who don't keep their promises anymore. For a moment, he just stared at me. I could see his thoughts racing, trying to piece together exactly what I meant. His frown deepened slightly, his confusion turning into something else, realization. The weight of my words sank in as he remembered. He knew exactly what I was talking about. The ring. The promise made not once, but twice. The excitement, the anticipation, the build-up that led to nothing. Twice, he had acted as though he was going to follow through, only to pull away at the last second. He was silent, and I waited. I expected something, a reaction, an apology, an explanation, even just an admission that he had been wrong. I wanted to hear him acknowledge it, to at least take some responsibility for the way he had repeatedly let me down. But all he said was, yeah. That was it. Just that. A single word, empty of emotion, heavy with avoidance. No apology, no attempt at redemption. Just an acknowledgement that, yes, he had done that, and that was all. Update 2. A few weeks passed. I kept my distance, not out of spite, but out of exhaustion. I was done chasing after expectations, done hoping for something that never came. The conversation from his birthday still lingered in my mind, the emptiness of his response, the way he had nothing to say except for that one indifferent word, yeah. It had cemented something for me, something I wasn't sure I could come back from. Then one evening, when I least expected it, he came to me with a small velvet box in his hand. There was something uncertain in the way he held it, as if he was waiting for my reaction before he fully committed to the moment. He placed it in my hands, watching me closely. He said he hadn't forgotten. My heart pounded. For a second, something stirred inside me, something instinctive, hopeful, despite everything. Against my better judgment, I let myself believe, just for a second, that this was what it should have been all along. That he had realized, that he had finally understood. That this was him making things right. I opened the box. Inside, there was a ring. But it wasn't the ring. It wasn't the one I had chosen, the one that had matched my bracelet and necklace, the one he had once hyped me up about, taken me to the store for, only to leave me standing there alone. This one was simpler. Plainer. Cheaper. It lacked the elegance, the craftsmanship, the meaning. It was just a ring. I lifted my eyes to meet his. I told him, without any emotion, that this wasn't the right ring. His expression shifted immediately. There was something defensive in the way his shoulders tensed, in the way his lips pressed together for just a moment before he responded. He shrugged, like it wasn't a big deal, and told me that it was still a ring. That he just couldn't buy the expensive one right now. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't anger, not really. It was something colder, something heavier. A confirmation of what I had already known. I slowly closed the box and placed it on the table between us. The silence stretched between us, and I let it. He watched me, waiting for a reaction, expecting something, gratitude, maybe, or relief. Some kind of validation that he had done enough, that this was good enough, that I should now erase everything that had happened before and accept this. I asked him why he had promised in the first place. He looked at me like I was being absurd. As if I was the one making this complicated. He told me that the important thing was the attention, that the gesture mattered more than the object itself. That I should be happy he had given me a ring at all. I stared at him, the words settling in my mind, the weight of their meaning pressing down on me. It was as if he thought he could throw anything my way and call it a resolution. As if he believed that after everything, after the broken promises, after the way he had built me up just to let me down, this was enough to undo it all. But it wasn't about the ring. It had never been about the ring. I didn't need a placeholder, a random piece of jewelry that meant nothing to me, that I had never wanted, that was only given so he could check some imaginary box in his mind and say, "See? I kept my promise." I needed honesty. I needed reliability. I needed to know that when he said something, it actually meant something. That when he made a promise, it wasn't just empty words spoken in the heat of the moment. That he could be trusted. And standing there, watching him try to justify this, watching him act as if I was ungrateful for not accepting this lesser version of what he had promised, I realized I had my answer. I stood up. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing left to say. I left him there with the box sitting between us, unopened, untouched. A symbol not of a promise kept, but of everything that had gone wrong. Update 3. The next day, I returned home a little later than usual. Work had been exhausting, the kind of day where every minute felt stretched thin, and all I wanted was to come home, take off my shoes, and let the silence wrap around me like a blanket. But as soon as I opened the door, I knew something was different. Jake was sitting in the living room, cross-legged on the floor, his entire focus directed at a huge box in front of him. The sight of him, the way his face lit up, the unmistakable excitement in his eyes, it was the happiest I had seen him in a long time. He looked like a kid on Christmas morning, eagerly tearing into the wrapping paper of a long-awaited gift. I stepped closer, the exhaustion from my day momentarily pushed aside by curiosity. Then I saw it. The bold letters printed on the side of the box. PS5. My stomach twisted. I didn't try to hide my surprise. He barely acknowledged me, too busy unpacking, pulling out controllers, cables, manuals. His fingers moved quickly, with the kind of enthusiasm I hadn't seen from him in ages. He was absorbed in the moment, completely oblivious to the way I was just standing there, watching. I crossed my arms over my chest, a slow realization creeping in. The words left my mouth before I even had time to process them fully. I pointed out the obvious. He had told me he couldn't afford the ring he had promised me, but now, here he was, with a brand new PlayStation 5 sitting in our living room. That was when he finally looked up. There was something in his expression, something light, almost amused, like he thought I was making a joke. He told me, so casually, that since I hadn't given him anything for his birthday, he had decided to buy himself a gift. I didn't react right away. I just stood there, letting the weight of his words settle in. It was never about the money. That much was clear now. This wasn't about affordability, about tight budgets or difficult choices. It was about priorities. It was about where he chose to spend his money, his time, his energy. He could afford an expensive gift, he just didn't want to spend it on me. He could have invested in our relationship, in something meaningful, in something that would have made me feel valued. But instead, he had chosen to invest in himself, in his comfort, in his entertainment. Something inside me cracked. It wasn't just the ring. It wasn't just this one moment. It was the pattern, the realization that this wasn't an accident, that this wasn't carelessness or forgetfulness. This was a conscious decision. A choice, made over and over again. He had always been capable of following through. He just didn't care enough when it came to me. The disappointment settled in my bones, deep and immovable. I could see it now, so clearly, like stepping back from a painting and suddenly understanding the full picture. All the moments that had led up to this, all the little ways he had made me feel like an afterthought, like something secondary, like a person who was supposed to understand when she was given less, who was supposed to accept being disappointed without complaint. I had spent so much time trying to make sense of it, trying to justify it in my head. But there was nothing left to justify. This was the truth. I didn't say anything else. There was nothing I could say that would change anything. I turned away, walked into the bedroom, and closed the door behind me. I sat on the bed, my hands resting in my lap, my mind completely still for the first time in weeks. I thought I would feel anger, frustration, sadness. But all I felt was clarity. This was who he was. And now, I had to decide who I was going to be. Update 4. It had never been about money. That fact had been clear from the beginning, even when I had given him the benefit of the doubt, even when I had convinced myself, over and over again, that he just needed more time, that things would be different if circumstances were different. But the moment he sat there, grinning like a child on Christmas morning, his excitement bubbling over as he peeled away the plastic, as he eagerly sorted through the controllers, the cables, the stacks of new games, it all became undeniable. It was never about whether he could afford something. It was always about priorities. He had made his clear, so painfully, so blatantly clear. I stood there watching him, my arms crossed over my chest, a dull, empty feeling spreading through me. He was completely absorbed in his new toy, so lost in his own world that he hadn't even noticed the way I was looking at him, like something had finally clicked into place, like the last piece of a puzzle had just slid in, forming a picture I should have seen a long time ago. I wasn't angry. Anger had burned itself out a long time ago, replaced by something sharper, something colder. It was one thing to not have the money. It was another thing entirely to pretend that was the case while spending freely on yourself, while throwing cash at luxuries that you truly wanted, while telling someone you claimed to love that what they wanted was just too much. I was done waiting. Done hoping. Done being disappointed. The next morning, I woke up with a kind of clarity that almost startled me. It wasn't just a decision, it was a resolution. The weight that had been pressing against my chest for months suddenly lifted. I had spent too much time waiting for him to make things right, waiting for him to come through, waiting for the moment when his words would finally match his actions. But he had shown me, time and time again, that waiting was pointless. If he wouldn't keep his word, then I would take what was mine. I found him exactly where I expected, sprawled out in the living room, still basking in the glow of his purchase, the PlayStation already set up, a game running on the screen. He was comfortable, completely content, as if nothing had happened, as if he hadn't just spent hundreds on himself after insisting that the ring he had promised me was too expensive. The contrast of it all made my stomach turn. I didn't hesitate. I told him to give me the money so I could buy my own ring. The ring he had promised me. The one I had chosen long ago, the one that was supposed to match the bracelet and necklace I had bought for myself because I had learned, even back then, that relying on him would only lead to disappointment. His reaction was immediate. His head snapped up, eyes widening, as if the words had physically struck him. He was caught off guard, completely unprepared for this version of me. He tried to brush it off, tried to dismiss me, telling me that the ring was too expensive, that we had already talked about this. I didn't even blink. I pointed at the PlayStation, at the extra controllers, at the stack of games sitting neatly beside it. If he could afford all of that, then he could afford the ring. The difference was that he had wanted the PlayStation. That was the real issue, and we both knew it. He had no problem spending that money on himself because it was something he cared about. His expression shifted. Something uncertain flickered across his face, but then he recovered, falling back into his usual justifications. He told me that the PlayStation hadn't exceeded the amount he had already spent on gifts for me. The scarf, the gloves, the dinner, the candle, he listed them all out, as if tallying them up would somehow make this better, as if reminding me of every single thing he had ever given me would erase all the broken promises. I had expected that response. I had heard versions of it before, every time he found a way to make himself sound reasonable, to justify his choices, to reframe the situation in a way that let him come out clean. But this time, I wasn't interested in hearing it. I had already made up my mind. I told him, without hesitation, that if he didn't give me the money, I would take it myself and buy the ring. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't asking. He looked at me, completely still. There was something strange in his eyes, as if he didn't quite know what to do with this moment. He had spent so much time assuming I would always be understanding, that I would always accept being let down, that I would always settle for less. But now, that version of me no longer existed. For the first time, he had no argument. No excuse. No justification. He reached into his wallet and handed me the money. I took it without another word and left. The moment I stepped into the jewelry store, something shifted inside me. This was what it should have been from the beginning. Not a grand romantic gesture, not an empty promise, not a moment built on anticipation that only led to disappointment. This was certainty. This was doing something for myself. This was knowing that I was worth the effort, even if I was the only one willing to put it in. I walked up to the counter, asked for the ring, the one I had chosen all those months ago, the one that matched my set, the one that had been meant for me all along. The salesperson smiled, recognizing me from the last time I had been there, when I had stood in this exact spot with my heart pounding in excitement, thinking I was finally going to have it, only for that moment to be ripped away. This time, I didn't hesitate. When the ring was handed to me, I slipped it onto my finger. The weight of it felt right, like something that had belonged there all along. I turned my hand, watching the way the light caught the stones, the way it perfectly complemented my bracelet and necklace. It was beautiful. It was perfect. I paid for it with his money and walked out feeling lighter than I had in a long time. When I got home, he was exactly where I had left him, sitting in the living room, the glow of the TV casting soft shadows across his face. He looked up the second I walked in, his eyes immediately drawn to the small bag in my hand. There was a shift in his posture, something cautious, something unreadable, but I didn't slow down. I sat down across from him, took the ring out of the box, and held out my hand, letting him take in the sight of it. I told him, calmly, that this was how it was done. Not with empty promises. Not with grand gestures that never materialized. Not with justifications and excuses. But with action. With follow-through. With meaning. For once, he had nothing to say. He just stared at me, silent, as if seeing me for the first time, as if realizing, too late, that something had changed. I don't know if I'm AITA, but I finally got the gift I wanted. Now I'm going to start giving him gifts too.